Senator Hayden, Mrs. Hayden, and your family, and all of you who are standing with me here today. Some of you have been here with me before. You know, I'm getting really tired of having to come to these press conferences. Really tired. Not only are they long, but we have to do it over and over again to get the same message out. Not to the people of Minnesota, who we know from objective, independent polling data support what we want to do with this kind of legislation. By overwhelming numbers, by the way, 82% of Minnesotans support full universal background checks on all firearm purchases. We don't have to convince the people of Minnesota. We have to convince the leadership in certain quarters in the legislature to listen to the people of Minnesota and pass these bills. And I promise you, we're going to keep at it. The single most effective thing that we can do to prevent the kind of deaths that we're talking about here today is to pass bills like this, is to keep the guns out of hands of felons, out of the hands of domestic abusers, and out of the hands of people who are suffering from dangerous mental illnesses. You're not going to catch them. You're not going to find out if the purchaser has a dangerous background, has been convicted of homicide, of murder, or of serious domestic violence unless you do a background check. I mean, how common sense is that? If you don't ask any questions, you're never going to get any answers. And these electronic background checks are very simple to do. I want to tell you what the background check bill doesn't do. It doesn't create any registry anywhere of who owns the guns. It doesn't take away anyone's guns. It doesn't restrict the kind of guns that a person can buy or own. It doesn't add any onerous or expensive oversight procedure to the purchase of a gun in Minnesota. And it doesn't in any way expand Minnesota's gun laws. It simply identifies those who are already in current law prohibited from possessing guns so that they are not allowed to make that purchase that they're applying for. Very simple. If you already have a lawful background, you need not worry about this bill. Not one bit. But if you are a convicted violent felon, yes, you should worry about this bill. And rightfully so. And I dare anyone on any side of the aisle, any member of the legislature, to stand up and say that we ought to simply hand guns to someone who is a convicted violent felon. It's already been identified that 60% of guns are purchased with background checks in Minnesota. More importantly, 40% are not. That's a big hole. You go to the airport today and you want to get on a plane to Houston or to Atlanta. And if 40% of the passengers didn't have to go through that security screening, would you get on the plane? Would you get on the plane? I'm proudly the chief author of both the background check bill and the gun violence protective order bill, and we're going to keep at it. And I don't expect, frankly, that we're going to make much progress this year because I think there are other items on the agenda. And we're running into roadblocks in all the usual places. But we're not only trying to play offense here this year, we've got to play defense. And defense can be pretty tough. We've got bills that have been introduced that would remove all safe zones from those who have permits to carry that would tell Minnesotans that you can bring your gun that you are carrying into our elementary schools, that you can bring them into our churches and synagogues and mosques, that you can bring them into our hospitals, and that you can bring them into the state fair. Now think about the state fair. Cheese curds, the giant slide, beer, and guns. And a lot of people, many of whom don't look like you or me, because we get the complete cross-section of Minnesota shows up. Is that the kind of mix that we're really comfortable in if people are allowed to bring their guns into the state fair because they've got a permit to carry? Now think about this. If that permit to carry is never renewed, it's a lifetime permit to carry. So if you got your permit to carry 10 years ago, and in between here, you killed your wife, you could still have your permit to carry and bring your gun into your child's elementary school. Because there's another bill out there that would make it a lifetime carry law in Minnesota, which just boggles the mind. It really does. People change, circumstances can't change. Whether you've got a gun or not, people who are 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, they commit their first crime of violence on occasion at every stage of life, whatever the circumstances are. Maybe it's a really terrible divorce. Maybe it's years of buildup of conflict with a neighbor over feeding deer in the yard. But whatever it is, it happens. And if the law gets passed that says you can still have your permit to carry for life, we may never find out if there's not a background check done when you apply to renew your permit to carry. Now, get this, even more dramatic, a bill that would delete from the statutes the permit to carry requirement at all, whatsoever, would allow you just to carry your gun anywhere you want, anytime you want, without even any permit to carry that. And this is not a conceal and carry law, by the way. It says nothing about concealing that firearm on you. It's open carry if you wish it to be open carry. It just allows you to carry it. And if you don't even have to go through the initial background check at whatever age you are to get that permit to carry, then there's absolutely no restraint whatsoever. You want to go back to the Wild West? In some communities, they're already experiencing that. Maplewood, 60 shots in one incident. So we have a lot of defense to play. And I don't know what's going to happen in the House this year. I don't anticipate that we're going to see these bills in the Senate this year. I mean, listen, first deadlines are in 2 weeks. But they'll be there. And when the opportunity's right, and when they feel the door is open, those bills will come out. Now there's one other, and I know that law enforcement is particularly concerned about this too, which is the Stand Your Ground bill. We've seen this before in Minnesota. The problem is we've seen this around the country, so we know how it works or doesn't work to protect public safety. Byron Smith in Little Falls defended himself with basically that premise and shot 2 young cousins as they came into his home. In a domestic violence situation, all a defendant would have to say is, well, I felt threatened by my domestic partner. And that would be a legal justification for using deadly force. And those teenage boys in Carver County a few weeks back who were playing keep away with a winter hat, when their neighbor came out and fired his gun 3 times because he felt threatened. And who's going to be the first person who dies because they got disoriented coming home and try to get into the wrong house by mistake. You know, they try to open the front door and someone inside gets scared and just fires blindly through the door. Or maybe it's their own son or daughter or spouse who forgot their key in their purse in their car. And they're trying to get in the back door, the internal garage door that might be locked, and they can't get in. Someone nervous inside, afraid inside, might just shoot their own child. All they'd have to do to defend themselves in court is say they felt threatened. Now, that just doesn't make any sense to me. We have robust self-defense laws in Minnesota already. And someone can use deadly force in public right now if they felt that they were threatened in such a way. But they also have a duty, if they can, to back away and find a safe alternative to using deadly force. The Stand Your Ground bill would reduce that, would eliminate that duty. We want to see increases in homicides. It's been documented around the country. In Texas, in Florida, homicides increased 32% by firearms in states that have Stand Your Ground, like Florida. A Texas A&M study found that in the 21 states with Stand Your Ground laws, there were 600 more homicides per year. Tampa Bay Times found at least 26 children and teens have been killed in Florida Stand Your Ground cases since 2005. And these Stand Your Ground laws have a disproportionate effect on communities of color. When white shooters kill black victims, the resulting homicides are deemed justifiable 11 times more frequently than when the shooter is black and the victim is white. 11 times more frequently, they get off scot-free. And in Florida, these cases with minority victims are half as likely to lead to conviction. Half as likely to lead to conviction. These laws also have had no evidence that they deter crime in any way. They don't deter crime. So the evidence is in. We just need to make sure that we are effective in blocking these laws from ever passing in Minnesota. Thank you.